Welcome back, everybody, to the Victory Road World Cup of Pokemon, hosted by Victory Road, Elgato, Metafi, and GT Tour. I'm joined by Mavo Rook for some more games of Pokemon between some really good players, and we've just had a bit of a sneak preview, and the matchup looks to be very fun.
Yeah, I'm psyched to finally have the two most Irish names on the casting seat together. I think that's pretty exciting. I've been waiting a little bit, so I'm pretty stoked about it. But like you said, some really interesting teams that we've been able to see. And we saw a lot of Lunala today, but no Lunala in this matchup. Going to be that Ice Rider Calyrex and Palkia on one side, which is a team core that we've seen quite a lot. But I haven't seen it nearly as much leading up to Worlds, and I know it's a team that can cause a lot of problems for a lot of opposite teams because, Heart Trick Room is always a tough team to beat, but for our players today, especially with the last few matches that we've had, I'm excited to see possibly a lead into that hard Trick Room, as we only really saw Trick Room kind of in small doses in that first game, didn't really come up in game 2, but this match for our round 3 will be between Nils Schlatter and Sebastián Gómez, and that is between Switzerland and Chile.
Yeah, Switzerland versus Chile is a match that, a lot of people have been anticipating because Switzerland has a long history against a lot of LATAM teams. Of course, last week they faced against Argentina, and I was told by a little birdie they did face Argentina in some friendlies in preparation to this tournament. So they're getting a lot of knowledge of LATAM, which is normally quite a secluded area of VGC. You get a lot of funky teams and a lot of up-and-coming players come from those regions because no one really thinks to counter them, and people often sleep on LATAM, and LATAM then sleeps on everyone else when it comes to the World Championships. Of course, it seems in the World Cup as well we are being slept on, but of course also a quite excluded country in Switzerland itself. Know a lot of players known throughout mainly the mainland European tournaments, but not as much worldwide, so it's going to be a back and forth of what are they going to bring and what aren't they going to bring, and it's going to be quite fun to see what our players have put together, try and think what's going to counter the opposing team quite well.
Yeah, definitely don't sleep on LATAM. I feel like we've been able to mention that every weekend in this broadcast because the teams have been so good. Peru, like you said, Peru is one of those other teams that has, I know, caused a lot of problems for a lot of teams, last year with the United Kingdom, and then they're paired with them right now as well in this qualifier stage. So really interesting to see kind of how strong the Latin America community is in Pokemon, and especially looking at it, Chile currently up 5-2 over Switzerland. Chile, this is their last match of the week, so it's going to determine if you have a 6-2 differential or a 5-3 differential. And with this group right now, that is incredibly important because this group for both of these teams is so close. Group 8, everybody still has a shot. Argentina is in the running still, and so is Canada.
Yeah, it's going to be a very close group, and honestly, I can see any of the teams making it out. Given they get the best that they possibly can. Switzerland did bring it back from a 4-0 deficit to a 4-4 draw, which was amazing to see for such a small country. But we can see in this week where they have slipped behind, and of course some of their top players, Stefan Mott, was won regional championships with top cut multiple events and made a call for himself, really. It's slipping behind, so Chile aren't really a force to mess with. And, just got to hope that Nils can maybe have that third point like we had for the past couple groups we've faced today, where that third point in a game can mean anything between knocking the bottom team to the bottom for sure, or bringing third and second closer together. And it is going to be something that is going to be heavy on Nils' shoulders, but, knowing that the teammates he has got in, like Stefan and a couple of other players, it's going to be quite easy maybe for them to have a game plan going into this.
Absolutely. And really what's something that's interesting to me, right, is as you kind of hit this point when we get so close to Worlds and even to the playoffs for World Cup as well, the teams become pretty standard. However, looking at both sides of the field here, I'm seeing a lot of teams that don't look nearly as standard. That Slowbro team that Andrea has used, I know they've used in a couple other weeks, I believe, Gaetan with the Colossal team with Sneasel instead of possibly running that Weavile like Santino ran for the World Champion Invitationals. Diego Ferreira running that Galarian Moltres with Raichu. So a lot of kind of more interesting picks here, whereas as we've kind of seen throughout the day, things look a little bit more standard. And even between the two players that we have today, between Nils and Sebastián, their teams are both also pretty standard kind of moving forward for this match. So not seeing any other Ice Rider Calyrex picks on Nils' side, and we saw from that sneak peek in between that is what he's going to be running. So you have to wonder maybe if as that Ice Rider pick for that last match of the week, if it's going to be a really nice call, maybe if the teams on the Chilean side were prepping a little bit more for some hyper offense.
Yeah, they could be prepping into that. We have seen just on that snippet, we saw a lot of the players were opting to go for very speedy teams, so that Trick Room could be something to catch them off guard. And talking about like what we could see off guard is like these players could catch each other off guard even further with the mind games. Both of them have had a bit of a lesser finishing, we should say, in these tournaments, but not ones that you should really put your nose up to. Of course, a top 8 finish in a World Cup Open, and then the Santiago Special Event top 16. So again, LATAM regions, they have quite condensed tournaments because mostly players, going to see over and over again. So getting top 16 at those, it's really good. And then World Cup Opens, those online tours, anyone can enter, and you often get hundreds, maybe even thousands pushing it players going into those. So it is always good to get a bit of a top 8 and kind of say, I've top cut this big tournament, I have the stamina to go through it, and you can easily have the stamina to go through a best of 3 and just win over your opponent there.
Yeah, and Nils, even though he lost in the top 8 of that World Open, he actually lost to the winner of Kosukide of that World Cup Open. So definitely, if you're going to lose to anybody, you might as well lose to the person who takes the whole thing. But like I said earlier, really nice hard Trick Room team pick from Nils, that Ice Rider, Calyrex, and Palkia with Incineroar, Amoonguss, Tapu Fini, and Porygon 2. Whereas Sebastián Gómez is running Incineroar, Kyogre, Zacian, Reggie, Alecki, Whimsicott, and Charizard. So you're looking at a team that loves to go faster than the opposite side of the field, and another team that loves to slow you down.
That is always something that a Trick Room player would love to see. I have tested both of these teams myself quite a lot on ladder. I myself am quite fond of the hyper-offensive style of the team Sebastian's using. Of course, Tara and Birdie used it to get into top cut of the NAIC. Maybe the moves have been changed a little bit from what Nils might have seen on the NAIC stream, but have the same sort of core emphasis of get your Pokemon super fast, do super big damage, and then have little tricks up your sleeves to kind of pivot around any tricky matchups. Like I know the Whimsicott maybe has Cotton Spore if it's the original team, and also has access to Sunny Day to maybe boost up the Charizard even further, even with the Kyogre on the team. But Nils also has options to set up Hail, has the option to set up its own Rain, use Max Wormings to reduce attack stats, and just get big damage off. Of course, Amoonguss can, be a threat in the Trick Room mode, because it's going to go so slow and it's going to get those spores off. And unless that Regieleki goes big, there's no way to get any electric trains up.
Yeah, and if you're Sebastian, right, and you're looking at your team preview, you really got to hope you've got Taunt on that Incineroar or on that Whimsicott, right? And Whimsicott only has 4 move slots, and Whimsicott has such a diverse move pool that is so good for support. And, when you're running it with this Charizard, like you said, Sunny Day is a move that you'll often see carry to help boost the solar power for that Charizard, especially if there's no Groudon on the opposite side of the field, and you're not exactly expecting a Dynamaxed Incineroar to go for something like a Max Flare when you've got that Palkia that can do that much damage. However, though, we'll be seeing from the opposite side of the field is going to be Charizard, Whimsicott, a nice strong lead early, plenty of power with that Tailwind and maybe a G-Max Wildfire. Palkia and Incineroar, though, will be the leads on the opposite side of the field, so some Fake Out, maybe some, you could go for something like a Max Geyser with that Hydro Pump, start putting on some damage, get the Rain out, and possibly try and stop that Charizard from beginning to steamroll, or even great time for Trick Room.
Yeah, it's a perfect alternative for a Trick Room if there is not a Taunt on that Whimsicott. Even if that is, it doesn't want to be Dynamaxing, so a Fake Out is very nice in that Whimsicott because it stops any possible outcomes. Charizard can deal a little bit into this Palkia. It might have Max Overgrowth, which could do a nice bit of damage to that Water typing in a Palkia, but that's when a Dragon type comes in handy and why Palkia is such a very powerful Pokemon. Charizard going big, it's what it does best. It stands there nice and shiny, it's big flame wings, it's intimidating on the screen, but is it intimidating to Nils' Pokemon? Because you could see a Fake Out, it does go out though, into the Whimsicott, and that just leaves Palkia free to go for any moves really. It could go for a nice Water type move into the Charizard, or it can, try and get rid of this Whimsicott, stop any taunts further on. If the Max Airstream comes out, so Palkia going for Trick Room would be even scarier if it does get the opportunity to take it off.
Yeah, and actually showing this Incineroar has an eject button as the item, kind of giving me some Jamie Boyd Salazzle vibes back when that was kind of the item that I knew he carried with a Pokemon that is not Incineroar to him for sure. But like you said, having the opportunity for Trick Room here, especially when you're facing something down like a Charizard that just went for a Max Airstream, is going to be huge because it allows for you to even go even faster but slower in Trick Room thanks to those switched up speeds, and Trick Room is going to be huge here. You've got your Calyrex in for free as well. Your Incineroar getting off of the field is actually great. You're also not even worrying about something like a Max Rockfall that went into that Incineroar, so no extra chip damage kind of coming out. Allows for this Calyrex to maybe go for something like a Glacial Lance, get a ton of damage off the Whimsicott as well. If it was Focus Sash, which it most likely is, that's been broken, so you could already get a Chilling Knee boost thanks to that Glacial Lance. It may possibly allow for your Palkia Palkia to go for that Dynamax thanks to that Life Orb and boost. You could get a really nice Hydro Pump off as well with a Max Geyser and start doing some great super effective damage onto the Charizard on the opposite side of the field and get rid of something that can be a massive threat and allow for possibly your own Calyrex to go for a double, go for a knockout as well, with both a Hydro Pump and a Glacial Lance, and possibly get 2 Chilling Mayboosts in a turn if you're possibly able to go for that instead.
Yeah, and both Nils opting to go for that mass amount of damage that you said about, but going for the Dynamax on the Palkia just to make sure that you can still get those double target slots on the Calyrex. It goes for his Glacial Lance, gets a knockout onto Whimsicott, so obviously at least one attack boost on it this turn, which means it's got that little bit of a snowball, which makes it very, very threatening. And even with a sunny day up, this Palkia is going to do immense amounts of damage with its Lustrous Orb boost, or possibly even Life Orb boost, into this Charizard. Charizard's already taken a lot of damage, and the rain is now up as well as the knocked out Charizard. I mean, any other fire types are coming back in that Incineroar. We're going to do even less damage to the Calyrex with its weakness to fire typing. And even if you have Zacian come in, that's still an even stronger Max Geyser going into that slot, which it will hate to see, and which it hates seeing its Kyogres as well.
Yeah, it could even be dealing with something like a Max Quake with an Earth Power that you often see on these Palkias, right? Zacian is going to be the Pokemon that comes in here for Sebastián, and Kyogre is the other Pokemon coming in, at least taking advantage of that water. But a really, really great set of turns from Nils. This is probably exactly how we would flowchart running into a team that is running that Zacian Kyogre, something that fast. Charizard being off of the field already without getting something like a G-Max Wildfire up means you're not taking that residual damage, and this Glacial Lance from the Calyrex with already +1 Chilling Neigh boost is going to be doing a ton of damage. If Kyogre wanted to go for a Water Spout here, it's not going to be doing nearly as much. Brings both of these Pokemon down to just above half, and then a Max Geyser from the Palkia boosted with this rain is going to be able to do a consistent chunk of damage onto the Zacian. Thanks to that Life Orb, it's able to get that knockout, and you have taken out 2 of the biggest threats on this team.
Yeah, with both of those threats to the Trick Room mode gone, it is just easy clear path here for Nils. Of course, maybe Sebastián could have gone for a Protect and tried to pivot around, and Nils has the option as well, if it had it, to go for Max Quake. As we see though, it doesn't have it revealing the 4 moves. It does have the Max Flare, possibly fearing Kardanas, or maybe a Ferrothorn, because Ferrothorn is really annoying for Trick Room to face in, because yes, you're slow, but Ferrothorn is the king of slow. You can get those Iron Defense Body Presses or Leech Seeds and just be really scary, but a forfeit there to maybe preserve information, giving Nils that little bit of time. I preserve my information, and then not as much information on Kyogre, but Kyogre is pretty bread and butter these days. Force Spout, Origin Pulse, and a coverage move, and then unless it's AV, it's got Protect in that slot there.
Yeah, that is a pretty quick game 1. I definitely understand why you would possibly want to go for something like a forfeit and just kind of take your time, recollect your thoughts, move into that next game. But if you're Nils, that definitely could not have gone any better. At least now showing the eject button on that Incineroar makes it something that you may not be as likely to be able to lead into that next game. The fake out is obviously huge, but then you may not be able to possibly switch your Calyrex in because they may not even worry about targeting that Incineroar. It may instead just be you send your Charizard and maybe you understand you might get the knockout. However, you instead go for something like a G-Max Wildfire on that turn 1 and just start trying to get some residual damage ticking up to help your Pokemon out in the back that need to come in and maybe kind of stall with that Trick Room a little bit. So I think at least at this point it becomes a little bit tougher because you have to understand what you're willing to give up if that Trick Room comes out, and there not being a taunt on that Whimsicott makes me feel like there is not a taunt on that Incineroar either, because that's a little bit of a safer call. So Whimsicott would have been the Pokemon you had it on. Oftentimes, if you're running Sunny Day, that would be one of those move slots that you would have to get rid of as well. Oftentimes, you'll see something like a Helping Hand. Most often, you'll see Tailwind, and then an attacking move, whether that be Energy Ball or Moonblast. So Whimsicott is one of those Pokemon that can be really tough to deal with, and if you're fishing for moves, at least now if you are on Nil's side that you're probably not worried about a taunt and you can get another free Trick Room off.
Yeah, and getting that Trick Room off is just what is giving Nils that pace to go forward. Seeing this team played in the past and playing it myself, sometimes your Sunny Day plus Charizard is your taunt, is your Helping Hand, because it does so much damage into most Trick Room setters. But Palkia offsets that, that boost you have, that pace you have with that lead because of its typing, and it can just get that Trick Room up straight away, unless you have maybe Zacian to fear it off with a Play Rough. But even if then, it can Dynamax or maybe have a cheeky Roselli Berry, but we know that's not on this set here, so maybe just having to keep that Zacian nice and healthy to knock out the Palkia, maybe slow down as many Trick Room turns as possibly have. But the Kyogre Incineroar coming out, Incineroar Palkia, so water type and water type, and 2 Incineroars. You know, it's going to be fake out heaven here because one of these is going to be faster than the other. You could see speed ties, you could just see a crisscross.
Yeah, honestly, if you're Nils, right, you have to hope that your Incineroar is faster than the opposing Incineroar so that you can get that fake out first to allow your Palkia to go possibly for a Trick Room. But instead, it's going to be a Dynamax of the Kyogre on the opposite side of the field will be the first thing that we'll be seeing. Kyogre at least possibly able to go for something like a Max Geyser boosted by the rain and knock out the Incineroar if it needs to and prevent that from doing any extra damage. But a Max Hailstorm even into the Palkia would be huge. But the fake out from Nils' side goes first, and Max Lightning is the coverage move that we're seeing on this Kyogre into the Palkia. It does just under half of its HP, does set up the electric terrain as well, but most importantly, because the opposing Incineroar was not able to go for that fake out of its own, or possibly even what looked like a different move here, Palkia is able to get that Trick Room up.
Yeah, it could have been opting to go for a Roar to even stop that Trick Room, or maybe going for a Parting Shot just to try and slow down the damage that could come out over time as quick as possible. It's just one of those things, again, Incineroar, like Whimsicott, has so many moves it can go for that you just never know what to pick yourself, and then that scares your opponent. As you see Taunt coming out, and of course, not being a Prankster Pokemon, it is going to get onto that Dark type, meaning that Parting Shot we did see getting hobbled over doesn't go through. The Hydro Pump going into a Pasho Berry on that Incineroar, so a good little tech there for opposing Kyogres and even the Palkias. We'll see how much it does in the rain though, as it does do just about 75, maybe 80% there. And Max Lightning comes out, might get the knockout with Electric Terrain onto this Palkia.
Revealing that taunt is absolutely huge, and you can at least see now why Sebastián led that Incineroar, maybe hoping that there wouldn't be that fake out in that turn. Wiki Berry shown on the Palkia as well. We didn't get to see that in that last game, but now you know that there is a taunt, right? So you can't go for something like that Parting Shot. This Incineroar really wants to get off the field. As good as it is in Trick Room, the Calyrex in the back is even better. So you may have to be a little bit more cognizant of trying to get that Calyrex in. However, when you're facing down a full health Dynamax Kyogre who can go for these Max Lightnings, who could go for Max Geysers into that Incineroar slot if need be, and then you're in a little bit of a tougher position. And instead, on Sebastián's side, he's bringing his own Incineroar out, bringing his Charizard in. Charizard, not exactly a Pokemon you love to see under the rain. However, it's pretty comfortable as there aren't too many turns of Trick Room left because you've been able to stall them out. But Porygon 2 coming in as a Pokemon that can handle a lot of damage. Actually copies the Solar Power here, interestingly enough. And Palkia going for a Hydro Pump into that Charizard slot where that Incineroar was, thanks to the Rain Boost, is actually going to be enough for a one-hit knockout.
Yeah, getting rid of the Pokemon on the switch in there was really good because, it could be a two-way thing. Maybe Sebastián was like, okay, I don't want my Charizard, Trick Room is up. This matchup's kind of, useless for this. So maybe going for a nice pivot to just get Incineroar in with what was known to be a knockout on the Palkia. Calyrex can come in, Incineroar comes in, so that's a -1 on that slot. But then, in turn, we have seen the Solar Power come out onto the Porygon 2, sorry. And that is going to mean that if Whimsicott is in, it's going to be scared to click that Sunny Day, maybe to stop any water type attacks coming from anything in the back. But of course, Kyogre being everything field isn't going to want to do that, so a bit safe there from Sebastián. As I said, Incineroar coming in, getting that attack drop. So both players, in that Trick Room, it's a weakened Calyrex, but at the same time, it's all the White Herb even. So a lot of things going on there, and Kyogre going small means that a Glacial Lance and maybe an Eerie Impulse is a slot into that. Maybe just a double up with offensive moves just to weaken it as quick as possible, as soon as possible.
Yeah, but this feels like the perfect time for taunt, right? You don't even need to go for something like a fake out because there's still, I believe, at least a couple turns of Trick Room left, maybe 1 or 2, and this Incineroar could go for a taunt, stop any potential fake out Trick Rooms coming from that Porygon, possibly stop something like an Eerie Impulse as well, and force this Porygon just to be put on the offensive. You're not really able to stop the Calyrex with that same measure, but at least you're kind of preventing this Porygon from being really destructive in this match. Couldn't go for something like a Recover as well, which is really what is huge for Porygon. But a Dynamax from Nils' side, most likely going to be that Calyrex. As much as I love seeing Dynamax Porygon 2s, not exactly the most common thing when you do have that Trick Room up and you have such a powerful attacker. And Calyrex able to go for something like a Max Hailstorm if it needs to, at least set up the hail, maybe get some extra chip damage as well onto the Pokemon on Sebastián's side of the field, or a Max Quake to try and start boosting up some of that special defense. So Max Quake will be the move choice here. Also onto this Incineroar for Sebastian's side, able to get that knockout, able to prevent it from coming in, going for something like that taunt onto your Porygon 2. The one nice thing about Incineroar is that its ability is Intimidate, so you are not too worried about some prankster taunts. So you're able to handle that a little bit earlier and get a Chilling Neigh boost right out of the gate, even if your Trick Room is getting closer to its end. Porygon 2, thanks to no taunt, goes for the Area Impulse into the Kyogre here. Gonna drop that special attack by 2 stages, and that's gonna be huge for Nils moving forward. Origin Pulse looks like it misses the Calyrex and is only gonna target into the Porygon 2, and that does so little damage.
Yeah, Porygon 2 just showing how bulky it is with that Eviolite and what a nuisance it can be as well with a plethora of moves that can either drop stats or boost its own stats. I mean, it is going to be scary going into these later rounds because you can just keep getting those max Quake boosts, especially when they're super strong against Zacian. And Koga can just do less and less each turn, meaning you can take the slow game and even out of Trick Room, you can be doing very well. Of course, Sebastián still has the option to try and pivot his team, pivot the Trick Room turns to get Zacian in position where he can just go for a big Behemoth Blade into Calyrex, and we know it's not weakness policy, we know it's not Berry, so it's not the end of the world going for that. And then Porygon 2 can just come back in healthily maybe later on if it isn't one that's targeted, get Trick Room back up again, and just kind of reset it over and over again. As you do see, Incineroar is the choice to switch in, so it is going to have the option to weaken the Incineroar, meaning that Porygon 2 can come back in Trick Room. It means that Calyrex can maybe take a couple more hits than it would have normally. A neutral attack, protect from the Zacian though, just keeping things safe, schooling out those Trick Room turns, as Max Quake is going to do a decent chunk into it, maybe not enough to, threaten it too heavily, but oh no, it goes into Kyogre, so great call there, and it just misses the knockout. But of course that is really fair because Kyogre's got so low a special attack now because of the boost in special defense and the Area Impulse, and a possibility of Origin Pulse misses. It does miss again, but it hits the Incineroar and does about 50% there.
Yeah, I mean, that eject button, I don't think Incineroar is all too worried about taking that much damage. The eject button allowing it to come back out and be a nuisance to that Zacian later on. Zacian to get that protect, like you said, so it's not going to be able to do that on the next turn. This Kyogre at this point really, I mean, not for lack of trying, hasn't been able to put out as much offensive pressure as Sebastián would have liked, hasn't been able to hit this Calyrex once, and this Calyrex, having the opportunity to go for some sort of ground type move if it really wants to, is going to be able to do a really nice chunk of damage with that Chilling Neigh boost onto the Zacian on the opposite side, even with Trick Room over. And Porygon 2 does have the opportunity, it is so bulky, it's able to kind of handle some of that pressure from the Kyogre. It may not want to take something like a Sacred Sword from this Zacian, but it could go for a Trick Room this turn as long as you think that thanks to that Intimidate, you may be in a better position. That Zacian may not be able to do as much damage. Sorry, not with Sacred Sword. It doesn't matter too much there. But the Behemoth Blade instead, going to be a super effective move onto this Calyrex. Well, again, like you said, no weakness policy. So this still does a ton of damage. Not enough for a knockout, but then also the Origin Pulse misses the Porygon 2 on this turn. Does hit into the Calyrex, but does, again, very, very little damage. Allowing for a Max Quake from this Calyrex here to do a nice chunk, a really, really super effective chunk onto this Zacian. Thanks to that Chilling Neigh boost, that is enough for a knockout as well. And this is going to allow for this Porygon 2 to set up its Trick Room and really kind of lock up this game once again for Nils.
Yeah, Nils just, having all the luck on their side just to try and push for that win. Of course, the eject button in the Incineroar getting hit nicely, got some nice Intimidate and got some switch-ins. Porygon 2 getting the avoid at the end was just a little bit of salt on the wound because that could have been a critical hit that then got Sebastián into the game again. Trick Room going up though is literally just bad news bears and possibly curtains here for Sebastián because we're going to see just Glacial Lance can do loads, and even not just that, Porygon 2 can go for attack, just be a bit cheeky, maybe even reverse, go for a Trick Room if you try to have a BM, but we don't want to do that in these games. And Nils though just riding on a high, a forfeit again from Sebastián.
That is a huge win for Switzerland, right? It's, it puts them into a better differential for the week, an incredibly decisive win. And I really did think that bringing something like Hard Trick Room against a team that clearly has prepped for hyper offense on Switzerland's side was a really smart move. And that's why these team formats are so interesting. You have your managers, and your managers will kind of give you coaching and advice. And that's the great thing about running a team format like Victory Road World Cup, because you're able to get a lot of advice from a lot of really, talented and, experienced sources. And so maybe if your team coach was like, hey, I know you used Ice Rider. We're kind of low on the deficit right now. Can you run that this week, and then maybe see if Chile's scouting, which was maybe showing us using all that hyper offense, prepped incorrectly. And that's something that I love about World Cup, and it's something that you don't really get to see as much when it comes to the VGC format, because it is, you're bringing what works best for you versus what may work best for an entire team of people.
Yeah, and finding that balance of, what works for you and what works for your team is always something to keep in mind in these tournaments, because, you could be like, oh, my manager or good, like maybe the best player on the team is using this team so well. I can use it, but that might not be your composition. Like some teams, maybe, one of their players is a really good trick room player, and that could then be really scary if then you're like, oh, but my opponent's running something that beats trick room, and something that comfort pick is always the best pick. But, having that ability to just, talk to your manager and say, hey, I'm not too comfortable with this team, they can give you something to help out. And helping out is something that's happened in this match as well, because we have just been told that, the teams are all very close in their contention. Argentina has drawn twice in this second group stage. Chile are 1-0-1. Switzerland have lost one, unfortunately, but got a differential, like you said, and drawn one. And Canada are typically top of the group with one win and a draw. So this could be anyone's group, and it is going to come down to those little shavings of points and games, which is going to be very scary in this group, but it seems in every other group. So, it's going to be a good close World Cup this year.
Yeah, and I mean, it's really great to have those decisive wins. Even if you go into a loss, it still makes you feel better about the team and maybe about how you're going to play into next week. So that morale is absolutely huge, not only for yourself, but for the team as a whole. So like you said, a really close group. Group A, I think, is going to be one to really pay attention to next weekend as we begin to break down how that last week of these qualifying stages wrap up as we begin to move towards the playoffs, which are really, truly so close in sight. However, that does mean we are going to take a quick break. We still have one more round of games to go, and it is definitely going to be a really nice round to see. So we're hoping for a game 3. I know we've had a lot of game 2s this weekend, but if we're lucky, I'm sure we will see some really exciting Pokemon action. So do not go anywhere.